I define play as using creativity, playing with our whole body, exploring our senses, really having fun and growing through that experience, learning about yourself. I think kids learn the most about themselves through play. Adults, we need to play more. Play is where you learn, that's where you create, and that's where you develop your sensory system.
Welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. My name is Debbie Reber, and I'm the host of this show. And today we are going to talk all about play. We know that play is the language of preschoolers and that for young children, it can be the key to learning. But play is also a powerful tool for supporting differently wired children of any age in developing skills, processing difficult situations, and learning about their own emotions and how to regulate them. It can also be a fantastic tool for parents to tap into as a way to move through the challenges of everyday life, everything from bedtime struggles to waiting in line at the supermarket. To tell us exactly how to best utilize play, I have Dr. Allie Ticktin on the show. Allie is a licensed occupational therapist with a specialty in sensory integration and early childhood development. Her life's work is to empower children to celebrate their differences through play, and she believes it's necessary to customize each child's treatment to his or her needs. She's also the founder of Play to Progress, a play-based learning center that guides children and their families through development while combining a nurturing environment with the just right challenge. There are a lot of great nuggets to be gleaned from our conversation, including simple reframes that can not only help us have more success as parents, but also make life at home with our children more fun. Thank you so much, and now here's my conversation with Allie. Hey, Allie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation because we're talking about play, which I'm a huge fan of and believer in the benefits of play. So as a way to get started, can you just take a few minutes and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about the work that you do in the world.
Absolutely. My name is Allie. I am an occupational therapist. I'm trained in sensory integration, and that really is my passion. And through it and working in different sensory clinics, I was noticing that kids were having a lot of one-on-one therapy, but it wasn't necessarily being carried over into the classroom or at home. So I wanted to create a way to help kids understand how to understand their own body within a group setting. So I started these different groups where we really work on how do I manage my body in a classroom when maybe I'm different than my friend. And the truth is, I think all kids are completely different. We can't expect kids to conform to this one way, which classrooms do expect. So I created these different groups, and I really work with parents on helping them to understand their own child, whether it means how to adapt their home, what their child needs, and the differences in their body. And often I'll get parents say, oh, this was me as a kid, and I was always getting in trouble. And they didn't really understand themselves, and now they're starting to through their child. So I really work through play to help kids understand themselves, advocate for themselves, and also help their support network understand them.
So what does that actually look like? Can you give me an example of maybe an avatar for a typical client and the kinds of things they might be struggling with? Or, are these necessarily differently wired kids, or is it any child who's struggling in some capacity?
Good question. It may be kids who are differently wired, but it also just may be your typical child. I personally believe we're all wired differently, and there's a big spectrum to how we are wired, yet we're expected to conform to this average. Let's sit in circle time for 30 minutes. My average client gets referred to me for things like they're in preschool and they're having trouble sitting in circle time. Maybe they're hugging peers too much. Maybe they're getting up or being disruptive in circle time. I have a few clients who are I'm saying seemingly because it's not really aggressive out of being mean. They may be acting out aggressively in class, whether that means hitting, but they're not actually doing it to be malicious. They're doing it because they're seeking sensory input. We call it dysregulation, having difficulty with regulation. And that's kind of our main referral, are kids who struggle to regulate and conform to what's expected in the classroom.
And so is your work then, is it to get these kids to conform, or is it to help them have a better understanding of who they are and how their bodies work? Because, we know that some environments are more restrictive than others. And even from preschool to preschool, there's a wide variety of what's expected or accepted in the classroom. So what is your goal when working with kids?
Good question. My true goal would be that all schools, preschool through elementary through high school, start to recognize that kids have different needs and we need to change our classrooms. In the meantime, we're not there yet. So I help children to understand that when their body needs something, and I'll help them to build, we call them sensory boxes, different toolboxes to have with them in the classroom, where they know I can go get that weighted ball and roll it on my legs during circle time, because that's going to help me, what we call staying in the green zone, stay calm and do whole body listening and do what is expected of me within this setting. So it's a kind of a combination of both. We work with schools, we work with parents to help as much as we can to bring in accommodations, but also for the child to understand when to use those accommodations. When can I go get that sensory ball that I need? When can I advocate and say, I need to go get a drink of water because I just need to get up?
Okay, so let's talk about play. And before we even dive deeper into play, how do you define it? I think it conjures up different images for anyone listening in terms of what that means. So how do you define play?
I define play as using creativity, playing with our whole body, exploring our senses, really having fun and growing through that experience, learning about yourself. I think kids learn the most about themselves through play. Adults, we need to play more. Play is where you learn, that's where you create, and that's where you develop your sensory system.
And would play look like any number of things? Is it playing games? Is it imagination? Is it sports? And do you kind of follow the child's lead when figuring out what play looks like for them?
Good question. I see play, yes, as in any number of things. It could be playing house, playing dolls. It could be riding your bike, whatever that child needs. It could be playing something very, very structured, like a board game. What I don't see play as is the iPad or the TV or really anything electronic. I see play as toys that don't interact for you, but you have to create the interaction. So even with babies, not a light up toy that does everything for you, but how do I actually play with this item?
So let's talk then about the connection between play and supporting kids in their development, supporting them in learning. So say more about that idea that the two are connected, deeply connected.
They are deeply connected. How kids learn is through play. We know we're seeing a lot more sensory difficulties and a lot more behaviors in this generation because kids aren't playing. They're not being forced to develop the skill to problem solve. How do I be creative? They're expecting everything to be done for them, right? An iPad tells you how to play. It doesn't teach you to play. So any of these toys that actually help you get the problem solving skills that will later on help you in math, the ability to be creative, which if you think of so many of our jobs as adults, we need to be creative, right? That's how we create whatever it is that we're creating. For you, it's this podcast. You're able to be creative within it. All of these core skills that will define and help us later on in our life first come from play. And one of the core things that comes from play is the development of our sensory system. Starting when you're very, very young and you're playing in the grass, in the mud, that's all exposing you to different textures. As you're riding your bike, you're getting a different type of input. When you're jumping off of something and crashing, that's another type of input. These are all things that help to develop our sensory system, which really help to define who we are.
So, okay, that's super helpful. I'm just thinking about also ages, right? So a lot of things we're talking about, I'm thinking of preschool and early elementary, kind of younger kids when I play is more maybe intrinsic, or it's just something that they are expected and naturally want to do. So what does it look like at different ages? Can you give us some examples?
Absolutely. So when we start in infancy, really young, 3+ months, play is on their tummy, right? They're just exploring the different textures. So putting them on their tummy to explore grass, starting to notice different lights, different patterns. That's play at that age. Eventually, they'll start to do very, very simple parts of play where they'll do container play, put this inside that. As we get a little bit older into the preschool age, we start to see some parallel play, and then eventually they explore playing together. And the play looks it has a lot of imaginary components to it. So you'll go into a preschool and all of a sudden the kids have just come up with a game where there's a dragon and they're chasing and they all know their role. And one thing that's tricky with kids who are differently wired is they have trouble jumping into that play because they can't read the situation and can't figure out, how do I get into this? And there isn't really directions. Kids don't ask, can I play with you? They just jump in and figure out the situation and play. As you get older, it ends up a little bit more structured. So whether it's soccer, playing more structured sports, and everything has a little bit more of a definition within the play and less imaginary, but still imaginary play is there. Just when you get into those years where you're the end of elementary school, the kids are playing things like, let's do a pickup soccer game. Let's play basketball. The girls may be playing gymnastics.
What about kids who aren't sports oriented, which I know a lot of our listeners, their kids are not into that? Would their play
be maybe art, building things?
Okay.
So taking a box and building it into a rocket ship, things like that.
Okay. So for many years, my son Asher, who's now 14, but when he was probably between the ages of 5 and 9, 5 and 8, was doing occupational therapy at, floor time. And it was all play based. And it was fascinating for me as a parent to watch what his, how his therapist would just try to engage with him in the play and just go all in. A lot of it was imaginative play. Sometimes it was just the two of them. Sometimes the other kids who were getting therapy at the same time would join in. And that was really interesting to watch and see how they would figure out how to work together. But as a parent, I learned a lot from watching Chris working with Asher. But I'm wondering if you have any advice or thoughts on how parents can tap into this sense of play, especially when they're going through more challenging times?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a lot you can tap into from figuring out emotions through play. And it starts with a parent knowing how to access play within their child. And I think the first piece is a parent drawing back and realizing play at that age is not so structured. And so let's meet the child where they're at. Oftentimes I'll have a kid come in and they'll be talking about an ice cream shop, and I'll say, okay, let's build an ice cream shop, and we're on a swing, and the swing is the ice cream maker, and we're swinging on it to grind the ice cream, and kind of coming up with these fun things. So I think it's following your own child's interests and leads and getting into their world really, really helps to then allow them to come back into your world. And then you guys have this moment together where you're able to truly communicate.
So it seems like parents too have to just be willing to really just to go there and be kind of silly, or, I think for a lot of parents, this may feel really unnatural, to just be silly and imaginative and not try to control the situation.
Completely unnatural. And I think that's the power of, for me, I bring parents into our session and I get them to be silly with me. Because if they're silly with me and they see me doing it also as an adult, they can imitate me a little bit more and then go home and imitate that. But it's completely unnatural. And I'll give you an example. I recently had a father in with me and, I said, he's really into Star Wars. Let's get him to work. This child has a really hard time playing. And I said, let's build on the Star Wars. There's so many things you can do. And we had created this whole imaginary world within Star Wars. And I had the dad come and join us. And he was like, well, that's not how you play it. Those aren't the real rules. That's not the real character. And I was like, but we're just being flexible. We're being within his world. And I really had to coach this dad on coming out of his own structured rules that we as adults have to meet his son where he was at.
And when we do that, what's possible? When we can really lean into our kids, what have you seen can really change for them, especially kids who struggle with regulation and sensory issues?
That's where we can see not only the parent understanding the child more, but the child understanding what his parent needs more, and helping the child to then learn how to regulate and how to get things that have to get done within the house done, whether it's bedtime, bath time, because there's more of a mutual respect there. Everyone understands each other more. A child also, I find this happens quite a lot. Once you're in the play, that's when you'll see the child really coming out and expressing their needs.
Yeah, I guess it provides an opportunity for things to come out, even if it's in character or role playing, that are really a glimpse into the emotional life of our child.
Exactly. And it may be something as simple, an example of something that recently came out. There's a child who's really struggling with sleep. She was having nightmares, but didn't know how to express it. But when we were playing, started role playing nightmares, and it became very clear that this is what's happening with her. And so then the parents understood that.
Right. Well, all right. Let's talk about some specific challenges where the power of play can come in handy. And the challenges, especially again with atypical kids, can be when they're younger. Many, their life is full of them, and especially in situations where we often have to repeat, or do on a daily basis, and we know we're going to come up across the similar challenges. So let's go through a couple of scenarios. During this month of planning and organization for big transitions, rhythms and routines have been absolutely essential for our physical and emotional well-being. So Green Chef nights are reliably and predictably a good night. We know the ingredients will be fresh and prepped, the instructions easy to follow, and the meal delicious. We're all still talking about last week's turkey tacos with mango chimichurri sauce, refried beans, and Monterey Jack cheese. Green Chef contributes to a healthy lifestyle with easy and delicious menus like fresh seasonal salads and grain bowls. And with over 80 weekly meal and market options, plus rotating options to suit a variety of lifestyles, whether Mediterranean, plant-based, calorie-smart, keto, protein-packed, gluten-free, there are always plenty of options to choose from. Whatever you select, you'll get farm-fresh ingredients, organic whole fruits and veggies, and premium proteins, all delivered straight to your door. I love those 4 words. Straight to my door. Oh, and one more thing I love about Green Chef, they have an app, which means it's easy to manage meal preferences and delivery from your phone if you want to. And I, for one, want to. I am in that mode where I'm making the most of little moments like waiting in line at the pharmacy or for the F train to pull into the station to tackle all of those to-dos. So the convenience of an app is key for me. Green Chef has a special offer for Tilt listeners. Go to greenchef.com/tilt50 and use code TILT50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. That's 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you use the code TILT50 at greenchef.com/tilt50. Maybe I've watched too many seasons of The Amazing Race, but every time I have to go somewhere on the subway, I treat it like a competition. It's all about making the right gut decisions about which route will get me there the fastest. Sometimes those decisions get me where I'm going early, and other times my gambles don't really pay off. Probiotics can't help with most gut decisions, but if your gut needs a little support, Ritual has your back. Their Synbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement, has clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome. I've been using Synbiotic Plus for about 6 months now, and it's become a core part of my morning routine. I take the mini capsule every morning while making my way through my inbox, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, because it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And the capsule itself is delayed released, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon, and that's exactly where we want it to go. Ritual invested in a study modeling the human colon, which showed that Synbiotic Plus significantly increased microbial diversity and the growth of beneficial bacteria. There's no more shame in your gut game. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Symbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off. You mentioned bedtime. Let's talk about that. So how can we use play to make bedtime go smoother? Because that's a rough time for many families.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of different ways. How I would start, you do want a routine within the play because bedtime is an area where you need a routine. But very simple things, heavy work, we call it proprioceptive input, is very calming. You want to give your child heavy work, but you can't just say, here's some heavy work. So creating a game within, whether it's before we go to bed, we have this laundry basket and we have all of our stuffies and all of our things that we like inside of it that make it heavy, and they like to go on a little ride before we go to bed. So we need to push them through the hallway and start to calm them. It helps to rock them to bed. Now you're giving your child proprioceptive input, which is very calming. Before bed, you're creating a structure that, oh, look, we calm our stuffies. This also calms our body. So you're pushing this heavy laundry basket filled with their things that you're calming throughout your house. Of course, you have to not mind that they push the laundry basket on your floors. But after that point, we have to all go and clean our teeth. And then we brush our teeth. And you may brush your teeth before, whatever works better for your child. Then you may have your next play routine where you're in some sort of imaginary world with your child as you're going to sleep. But it always has to be calming. So you're always thinking nothing alerting. And alerting would be anything like bright lights, jumping, any sort of big, fast movements. Mm-hmm. So you're winding them down. You're keeping them calm. You're giving them the inputs they need, but you're creating a story around it. So you're doing it through play.
And then does that story have to evolve? I imagine over time, they either catch on or it's not as entertaining. So do we just have to kind of keep shaking things up to keep them engaged?
And the truth is that they will evolve the story.
Okay.
And you have to be willing to follow their lead. The other thing I always say is if you watch a child, their bodies truly know what they need. A kid goes towards the sensory input that they're craving, towards the sensory input that they need. As parents, we want to kind of shape what they're doing, but if you just follow their lead, you will figure out what they need.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, so we have a big sensory gym with a foam pit, swings, rock wall. The first thing I do when I'm evaluating a child is we go into the gym and I say to the child, anything you want, go for it. We see a few different things. Some kids will immediately go to the foam pit. There's an area off the foam pit where they can jump and crash. They'll be jumping and crashing. And I'm thinking, oh, that child needs more heavy work, more proprioceptive input. They're having trouble regulating. They're very much seeking this. Another child may jump right on a swing and be spinning. That child needs more vestibular input. Then there's also the child who looks in the gym and doesn't know what to do. That child may be having trouble with motor planning, ideation. They don't know how to play. So that child, we need to teach them how to play and figure out why don't they know how to play. And then from there, build off of their skills that are already there. So as you watch your child, recess, I'm constantly talking to parents about recess. It's a very important time, and it's where kids create connections. I'll talk to a teacher and she'll say, well, at recess, he's just running and hugging everyone, or he's crashing into everything. And they are constantly saying, no, Johnny, don't do this. But what if we took that and we say, Johnny, I can see your body really needs some heavy work. It's not so, our friends don't like it so much when we use their body for it. But how about if we push this truck in the sand and we dig and we bury the truck? That might feel better for our body, because then the child just transformed, I'm the bad kid, to I understand my body better. I'm not bad. I just need this work, and this is a better way to get it. And I think that is a core problem. I see parents will be saying, no, stop moving. No, stop moving. Teachers, stop moving. No. And why not transform that no? And instead of saying no, let's say something more functional and teach them what their body needs.
Yeah, I like that. And it makes total sense. And I think it is something that so few of us do, because often we get the message that it's a negative behavior that needs to be addressed. And so we go right to trying to find solutions that will stop the behavior as opposed to redirecting or channeling it in a way that will feel good for everybody.
Right. And in that scenario, you just redirected towards a more functional play. Because the child that's running and hugging, he is seeking play, but he doesn't know how to play for his body.
So interesting. Asher was the swinging guy. And I really found that so fascinating when Chris would say, well, swinging and spinning is what he needs to reorganize his brain, and I found that fascinating. And it's, he's 14 now, so he's not really into playgrounds, but
right.
If we're traveling or we're somewhere and we see a swing set, he'll still want to jump on that swing for a few minutes just because he loves that sensation.
Absolutely. And, I'll tell you, as a child, I was a complete, we call it vestibular seeker. I really needed a lot of swinging. And I remember standing in my kitchen and I used to spin around and round and round. I used to ask my sister if she wanted to do spinning contests. It wasn't until I was older and in OT school that I started to connect that is how I would regulate myself. But my body knew that that's what I needed, so I would seek it. However, in school, what would happen? I would get in trouble. So that's where I think so many parents and teachers don't understand. And there is a sense of we're shaming our kids. And how do we form that into more of a functional play and pull the shame away? Because it really should just be, if we can teach our kids young that a behavior is a way to communicate, but there's a more functional way to do that, how would they be as adults? It would really help them to understand themselves and have so much less shame. I talk to parents all day and they're saying, I did this when I was little and I always got in trouble for this. They still carry that with them. They're adults with children, they're successful, and yet they still remember that time they were shamed in elementary school.
Yeah. And ultimately, this is about knowing what you need. It's knowing that for me, after doing something really social, I'm an introvert and I need to be alone for a good long time. Ultimately, it's just kind of understanding who you are so you can make good decisions for yourself.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that is what my goal with all children is how do we help them advocate for themselves and say, I'm not doing these things on the playground because I'm bad, but I need this instead. And that's what parents can do really through play. And I think for me, a lot of parents turn to behaviorists and different things, but I do think it's also important that they truly understand whenever we are telling a child no, we're recognizing that a child communicates with their behavior. So we need to acknowledge the reason they did it and help them to understand a better way. And that is, we do it all, through play. Often the answer is a more functional play.
So let's talk about another situation then that can really be challenging for a lot of our kids. Things that involve waiting, like waiting in line, maybe waiting in line at the supermarket. For us, we travel a lot and waiting in line for security for 45 minutes can be really hard. Yeah. So tell me.
Or at Disneyland.
Oh gosh. Yes.
I hear that a lot. Waiting is hard. It is a hard skill for any child, and especially the child that's wired differently.
Yeah. So how can we use play to minimize or to support that?
What I immediately go to in waiting, there's a few things. You do want to build an expectation around the wait and kind of do help build some structure in. If we're going on this adventure, do you notice that line? As the line gets smaller, that's when we're almost done. We can maybe expect, always overdo it. Like, if you know the exact time that you're going to be waiting, you can use different tools. But within that scenario, the first thing I always kind of carry is some sort of fidget to help them in their hands. And then you can use anything that you see. If you have a wall nearby, I'll often have a kid say, do you think we can push the wall and make it bigger in here? I'm feeling cramped. And you run against the wall and you pretend you're in this imaginary land and you're pushing against the wall and you're like, I see it moving. It's getting bigger. But again, you're providing that proprioceptive input, that regulating input, doing it all through play. The other big thing, and you have to be, I'm perfectly okay with this. You have to be okay with doing this in public, but it's just little like a downward dog or anything like that. It's totally fine for a child to do a downward dog in a line. Little moves like that, going through a little sequence, can really help. The other thing are little games like, let's look for something red, and you spot how many red things and get really silly with it. If you do it, let's just find something red. Do you see that red thing? But instead get silly, say, oh, is that red? And you're pointing to something green. You'll be like, oh, I forgot, red isn't that color. And so getting really silly and engaged and having these games within the waiting. There is a piece I always say, build structure into transitions and into waiting. And you can do that with play, but you do want to help to regulate within that transition and help to have an expectation of how long they're going to be waiting. Because if not, it just feels like they're going to wait for an eternity to them. And it's very, very hard.
Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything. Because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
If you're a parent, I invite you to join us at the Mindful Mama podcast, where it's all about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. With sometimes hilarious and always thought-provoking experts and friends, at Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm Hunter Clark Fields, and I can't wait to see you there. Listen in to the Mindful Mama podcast.
I just want to ask, because you mentioned you have to be okay doing this in public. Kind of in general, I think some of these things can be hard when our kids are spinning out or they are really struggling in a public situation like this, and when they're traveling or they're at an amusement park or that kind of thing. Any thoughts or words of wisdom maybe that you've shared with parents in your practice about how to deal with judgment from others when they're trying to support their child?
Yeah, great question. This is something I talk about a lot. The first thing I would say to recognize is every child has tantrumed in public at least one time. So every parent has gone through this. And even though we feel like all eyes are on us, sometimes the eyes may be on you with sympathy. Like, I get it. We've all been there. But I also think just explaining he's having a tough day, a simple comment like that can really help turn the judgment around. If you're comfortable explaining that maybe he has sensory processing difficulties or he's differently wired, explaining that, feel free to, but you don't need to justify yourself. I think it's okay to just recognize everyone has a child who has tantrumed in public before, and it's okay to just say, you know what, he's having a tough day, and accept that.
Yeah, I like that. End of story. He's having a tough day.
Right.
Move along. Yeah, nothing to see here.
If you have children, you'd experience this too, type thing.
Right. So I want to ask about games. I don't know if this is part of the work you do. I know that for a lot of kids, whether it is being on a sports team and having the outcome not go their way, or playing games, which a lot of these kids are drawn to, yet really struggle with losing. Mm-hmm. Any tips and tricks surrounding gameplay in that way?
So losing is something, if you sat in on one of our groups, you would see us focusing on very heavily, because it is true that a lot of our kids really, really struggle with something not going their way. We use the term, we have to be flexible. And if anyone has heard of social thinking, that's a term that comes from them. And essentially what we are wanting to do is teach the child that there's going to be times when someone else will be flexible, and at times you need to be flexible. So I always first kind of acknowledge their feelings. I don't ever say, oh, sometimes, we have to be a good sport. This is just how it is. I will say, I understand that you really wanted to win, and it must be really upsetting that you didn't win. When I don't win, I get really upset too. But remember that time that you did win and that felt really good. Do you think that the other, so-and-so, whoever the other child is, he probably didn't feel as good too, but it's important that we can be flexible, and sometimes we win and sometimes we lose, but it's okay to have your feelings. It's just not okay to have a big reaction. But so you're saying, I understand your feeling, but your reaction is the piece that we need to work on, but your feeling is still valid. It's okay to be upset that you didn't win. How many adults do you know, when they don't get the promotion that they want, are upset? It's the same as a child losing a game. It's okay that that adult is upset, and it's okay that that child is upset. But we just want to teach them to have a smaller reaction to that situation.
So for parents who are listening, whose kids really struggle and may think this is always going to be hard, do you, with consistency over time, is this something that kids can generally learn at least coping mechanisms for gameplay?
Absolutely. I see a lot of success with this. Actually, probably one of the areas that we see the most success in.
Huh. Interesting.
I think when a child really understands that losing a game is normal and you make it okay to have those feelings, just change their reaction, they respond very, very well.
Right. Very cool. So before we go, do you have any recommendations for if parents are looking to buy some toys or games that can especially help with the skills we're looking to develop? Any favorites you want to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So my number one thing that I always kind of preach about toys is you don't want toys that play for you, but rather toys that you play with. That means kind of no light up toys or toys that will drill for you or anything like that. You want more of a wooden base of toys that forces your child to be creative and play with the toy. The other thing, if you're looking at books, there's really amazing books out there that help children learn how to be flexible and dealing with things that are difficult. There's a book called The Worry Bug, and the line is The Worry Woos, but the book that I'm specifically talking about is A Worry Bug. It's a great book that helps teach kids about anxiety. There's all these different books out there that you can read and start to relate to themselves. But I think in terms of toys, it's making sure that the toys are simple. Just a ball, not a ball that when you bounce it, it lights up. A simple wooden toy, or a very simple basket, things like that. And using things like saving your boxes. Everyone relies on Amazon nowadays. Use those Amazon boxes, save them, and create something out of them. So keeping things very simple. The other thing I always say is I do a lot of toy room consultations, and I'll walk into a toy room and I will see a million toys and they're everywhere. Even if they're organized, there's so many toys. You don't need that many toys. Your child really only needs a few toys at a time because that becomes overwhelming. So take those other toys and put them away in storage and then rotate the toys out. So maybe every month you change the toys, but you only have a few toys available.
I love that you do toy room consultations. I've never heard of that before. That sounds kind of fun.
Yeah, it started because I was constantly preaching to parents about changing the environment of the playroom. You don't need a million paintings on the walls. That's all overstimulating. And if you have so many toys, all it does to a child who has any sort of difficulty with regulation is they're going to jump from toy to toy to toy to toy. It's not going to teach them to play. We're trying to increase attention and teach a child to play. But if they have a million options, how are they going to choose one when they already have difficulties with regulation? If they have 5 options, it's much easier to pick one. If the walls are too overstimulating, how are they going to focus on playing when they're visually distracted? And we know that this is a difficult area for many of our kids. So keeping things really, really simple. I always say having a cozy regulation corner where you've eliminated all, it's either a tent, something that you've eliminated all visual input and you go in and it's more of a calming area and their bodies know I can go there to calm, but it's never a timeout and never a punishment. It's always their option to go there.
This is great. Well, Allie, thank you so much. This has been really interesting. It's something we haven't had an episode about before, is just the power of play. So I appreciate the strategies that you shared and your insight. Can you let listeners know where they can learn more about you and your work?
Sure. So you can learn more at playtoprogress.com. That's the number 2. So the word play, the number 2, progress.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at play2progress. And we post a lot of different videos. I do informational videos as well as tips and tricks every day.
Oh, awesome. Well, Allie, thank you so much for coming by on the podcast today and sharing with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was so much fun.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. For the show notes for this episode, including a link to Allie's website, Play to Progress, which, by the way, has a lot of great videos and tips on handling everything from picky eating and toe walking to proprioception challenges, as well as all the other resources we discussed today. Visit tiltparenting.com/session165. Don't forget to leave a rating or a review for Tilt Parenting on iTunes if you haven't done so already. Ratings and reviews help keep this podcast visible in an ever-growing sea of podcasts. Thank you so much for considering. Lastly, if you want to stay in the loop on everything happening with Tilt Parenting, and I will just say that I am cooking up some new programs for the fall. Join us by signing up at Tilt Parenting. You can sign up through our 7-day challenge, which is a 7-day free challenge where every day for a week you'll get a video with a little tip or strategy to use in your life that day to help create a better experience in your parenting relationship with your child. Or you can just sign up on the bottom of any page on Tilt Parenting. There'll be a place to sign up and to stay in the loop on what's happening with all things Tilt Parenting. Every week I send out a simple, short, and sweet newsletter with a little personal note from me, highlights of the week's episode, 5 articles that you need to be reading that week that have to do with parenting unique kids, and also a quick look at upcoming events that you'll want to have on your radar. And that's all for this week. Thanks again for listening. And for more information on Tilt Parenting, just visit www.tiltparenting.com.
Hey, are you a parent of a teenager? Are you feeling overwhelmed about how to be what they need while also holding limits and boundaries that keep them safe? Are you tired of conversations that negate how messy this season of parenting is? Well, I've got you. My name is Casey O'Rourke. I am a positive discipline trainer, parent coach, and the host of the Joyful Courage podcast. Every week, I come to you with an interview digging into tough topics with experts I trust and solo shows that go deep into the personal growth and mindset needed to raise teens in a way that grows them into confident, capable young people. I am not afraid of getting real about the intersection of conscious parenting and the teen years, while also bringing in vulnerability, humor, and lightness. I'm walking the path with you and honored to serve. Listen to Joyful Courage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume podcasts.